Whenever I see a wall like this, I have to wonder how bad was this surface that this texture is actually better than what it was. That being said, because it's quite solidly attached, no really loose material, it's actually going to be a pretty easy fix. All I really can do with this surface is scrape. So I got my taping knife and I'm just scraping chunks and high spots off. And I think I got it looking pretty good, as good as I'm going to. See, I got this little edge here off, some chunks here. There's a little thick spot here still. But not a lot more I can take off. So now I'm going to coat the wall. I'm going to use the +3 joint compound. I'm going to use my +3 joint compound, and I haven't thinned it down. I just stirred it up. I'm going to apply it with my taping knife and smooth it out the best I can. But today, I'm really just trying to get some depth to this joint compound. And then tomorrow, once that's dry, I'm going to sand it and then start getting it really nice and smooth and tight. But today, I want to put the compound on deep enough so that I'm covering the depth of this really bad texture on this wall. I think one thing that's making this a little bit easier for me to do is the fact that I did not thin the compound down. The thinner compound would be more difficult to apply to this thickness, and I think it would be a little more difficult to smooth. Thinner compound is something we will get into using for the finish coats on this wall. But for today, I'm happy with it straight out of the bucket, no water added. All right, you can see this is the first area that I did. I applied the compound and smoothed it out. You can see how it was blended in pretty well. I've got it on heavy enough that I'm hiding that texture. Now the area down here on the bottom is where I just applied the compound. This is where I'm going to use my 12-inch knife. I'm just going to pull it across. Pull it up from the bottom. All I'm really trying to do today is get it filled, and I'll worry about getting it perfectly smooth and getting rid of all these tool marks and things on the next coat. It's really looking pretty darn good already. All right, this is what I did yesterday, but today it's nice and dry. And you can see it really doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's a little rough, of course, but I'm going to sand this, knock this edges down, and then I'm going to put another coat on it. I'm going to use a roller and a 12-inch knife. But today I'm going to sand it with my power sander here. I'm using this because it's pretty aggressive, and I do want to knock quite a bit of texture off the wall here. So that's hooked to my dust extractor. If you don't have one of these, you can always use a pole sander. Probably want to go with like an 80 grit or something today, just to knock this down. Doesn't look too bad. You can see it's still got some defects, of course, but it's pretty flat. Pretty happy with it. Just gonna apply the compound. What I've done was I've thinned down joint compound, the +3 compound that I really like using. I've thinned it down. I'm gonna apply it with this roller. Just roll it on, let it sit for a few minutes, and then start wiping it down with my 12-inch knife. I put a pretty generous amount of compound over the surface. I'm going to do this whole wall. This is about a 5 or 6 foot long wall. I'm going to cover the whole thing with joint compound before I even think about trying to smooth it out. So just dipping it in the bucket. You can see the consistency. It's not too thin. It's not just dripping all over the floor. Then just roll it right on the wall. I like using the roller because it's fast and easy, and I can get it on pretty consistently with a roller. The alternative would be to put it on with a taping knife. There you go. I've got it rolled on the entire wall. I'll let that set for maybe 5 minutes before I start wiping it down. I'm probably not going to be removing all the compound, just leaving enough on there to get it nice and smooth. Okay, I've got the compound rolled on the wall. It's been sitting for about 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to start wiping it down, getting it smooth. And this time I'm using these 3 tools. This is kind of like my hawk. I'm using this trowel for a hawk. I have my 6-inch knife for the inside corners. And the 12-inch knife is what I'm going to be using to smooth out the compound. I'm going to start right at the top. I want to get it nice and clean right up into that corner. So I'm putting a little compound on my knife. Go right up into the corner with it. I'm doing this before I even start smoothing anything out. Doing that because my roller didn't go right up into the corner. Now the benefit I have of letting it sit for a few minutes before I started wiping it down is it's actually started to tack up just a little bit. Don't forget, this surface that I coated yesterday is dry and quite porous, so it's really absorbing the moisture out of this compound. So really what I'm doing is I'm just smoothing. I'm not really moving much compound at all. I start out with a clean, when I start out with a clean knife, I'll show you what I mean. Okay, there it's clean. Gonna wipe it down, just smoothing it. See, I took almost nothing off. Now when you want to leave compound on, which is what I'm trying to do, I'm not really trying to remove, I'm trying to smooth the compound, get it as nice as can be. When you're trying to do that, you want to keep your taping knife pretty flat. Because if you keep it more on edge, that's when you're going to remove, or if you keep it more on edge, that's when you're going to be removing compound. We're not trying to remove compound here today any more than necessary. Just trying to smooth the compound. So I'll put a little on just to get into this corner. And then I'm just taking my knife, 12-inch knife, and pulling it along the wall. thing that helps me achieve this nice smooth look that I'm creating is this 12-inch knife. I created a curve in it. Like, in other words, I can bend the edges of this to create a crown in my taping knife. So the convex side is the side that goes against the joint compound. I use that side because that pulls the edges of the knife off the joint compound. So I'm not leaving as many tool marks. By keeping them edges off the compound, I'm minimizing the amount of tool marks that I'm leaving. You can see how flat I keep the knife. Just pulling it along, nice and smooth. And there you go. I'm really pleased with that. Very few tool marks, pretty darn flat. It's gonna sand out real nice. Today I'm gonna do the sanding on these walls. It actually looks pretty good. I've got all the texture hidden and just some minimal tool marks to sand out. So I've got the walls all sanded, actually ready for primer. This came out really nice. I'm really pleased. Let me just go over what I did. This had a kind of a rough texture on it. The first thing I did was I scraped off anything that I could scrape off with my 6-inch taping knife. And then I applied a layer of the +3 joint compound. This is the compound that I used for this job, USG +3. I just mixed it up. I did not add any water or anything because I wanted the thicker compound because I was putting on a good heavy layer enough to hide the depth of that texture. Once that dried, I sanded it with a pretty coarse grit, about an 80 grit sandpaper. And then I applied the finish coat of the +3 joint compound, and that I did thin down with water, and I applied it with a roller. The key thing there after I applied it was I waited 5-10 minutes before I started smoothing out. That allowed me to leave the desired amount of compound on easily without pulling it all off, and the +3 works really well for that particular technique. So I didn't really remove much, even in that final coat. I just smoothed it out with my 12-inch taping knife. Remember, when I used this knife, I did put a concave surface, and the convex side is the side that went against my wall. And then after that dried, I simply sanded it with a 220 grit paper and touched it up as necessary. Really, this was a 2-coat fix. The base coat and the finish coat and sanding. You know, I think one thing I found interesting about this, I only have maybe like 16 feet of wall here, 16 by 8 feet high. I use a lot more joint compound than you would think. I use almost two full pails of the compound, and each bucket has 4.5 gallons. So I use about 8 gallons of joint compound to fix these walls. So don't think you're going to just get away with a 1 gallon or even a 5 gallon bucket. It's going to take quite a bit of compound to get rid of a texture as deep as this.